Okay, so I'm doing this video because this is not to make fun of anybody, because I know Tacoma has been through the ringer when it comes to trying to just get acknowledgement and to even recover. Not from the pandemic, but just recover. And be sure to join the Discord down in the description box below. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. For those who are considering to move to Tacoma, definitely do it. There are so many things happening right now that are really in our favor. There's a lot of great things happening in Tacoma, and you have people who will sit and say, I don't know where to move. I'm thinking about moving to the Pacific Northwest, but I don't know where, exactly where I want to go. And they mentioned Seattle typically and some of these other places, but those places have always been fairly popular. And what happens is that companies will locate there very quickly. And these are big, huge companies. They're hiring several hundred people at a time or several thousand at a time. And while the going is good, it's great because you have a bunch of people coming in, working during the day. The streets are full. You have all the tourists that come in, and it looks beautiful. Tacoma, on the other hand, people kind of thumbed their nose and said, I'm not interested. A lot of these tech companies not interested. And the king in King County is Seattle. Seattle has been the biggest beneficiary of jobs, well-paying jobs at that. I remember when Tacoma was begging for jobs to come down here because mainly it's such a struggle getting up to Seattle, and I-5 is a nightmare. Sound Transit, by the time they finally build the light rail down here, that's a half a decade or more. And let's see, I think it is more than a half a decade. So things change rapidly, especially down in Tacoma. Sleepy Tacoma. Hold on one second. My kids are loud. You guys know that. So we did not get the same love from these big tech companies. And now what you're seeing is massive layoffs. You're seeing from Zillow to Redfin to Amazon and Microsoft and Facebook, you're seeing layoffs. They moved into a lot in big towers, speculative towers. They took a suburban town and turned it into a metropolis. And now the market rate is higher. The office vacancy rate is higher in Seattle and higher in Bellevue than it is down in Tacoma for one of the first times in maybe ever, definitely in a long time. It's not like we're signing one lease. We're signing two leases at a time. That has happened several different times, and now 4 leases at a time down here in terms of office space. It's hot down here. When I say the market is hot, it's hot. We're insulated from tech companies. We don't really have a lot of them. We have some, but we are on fire. Why? Because there are so many different perks to living in Tacoma. It's much cheaper. It's much more affordable. You have all the same amenities that Seattle has, minus the higher taxes, minus the heavy commutes, parking, which is a nightmare. It's much more expensive in every aspect. There's not one aspect where Tacoma is more expensive than Seattle or Bellevue. There isn't. You're going to get more bang for your buck for your house. People used to tout crime and everything else, but when you look at the crime rates in Seattle, Tacoma, and Bellevue, you can sit there and kind of cut that in many different ways. I mean, they all have their own share of issues. So when you narrow everything down, you're seeing one bright beacon out of the three. Out of the three. One of the things you should do is take a port tour. I took a port tour. I had to. Okay? Take a port tour of Tacoma. And you'll see, for one, you're talking about good, well-paying jobs. Where are all the good-paying jobs in Tacoma? Thousands of them are right here, and they make good money. People who maybe went to high school, didn't even worry about going to college. They went, got some little odd and end jobs at the port, finally worked their way up, Now some of these people making six figures and more. Well, not six figures, but like high six figures for some. It's a stressful job, but you have a lot of people who make pretty dang good, really dang good money. It's just right close to downtown. You could see it. That port tour will pretty much show you that Tacoma is not some wimp. It's the biggest port in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, we do volume. We have the biggest cranes in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle does not. We have the biggest. So to handle the biggest ships that don't even exist yet. This city is not a joke. I'm going to go through and talk about, and I'm going to miss a bunch of stuff. It started off February of this year. Northwestern Mutual signed a 15,000 square foot lease. I'm going to try to keep track of these. Let me get my pen out. Northwest Mutual. They went to the tallest building that we have. The building was built in 1970, so before I was born. We haven't had any new office buildings built since then, really, of size. So that should tell you something. But I have a feeling that may change. The thought was we had such a high office vacancy rate, and the pandemic just made that worse. We had a whole lot of people leave. But one thing Tacoma did do was offer incentives for people to bring their companies down here. Now, incentives, you may not want to call it that because, technically they're not incentives, but they're telling companies, you come down here, we'll give you, instead of a head tax, we'll give you a head credit, as long as they're making a certain amount of money. So these are businesses that are now, that was years ago, and it's just now bearing fruit. Okay? And it will continue to bear fruit. But Northwestern Mutual signed a lease at the 1201 Pacific building, the tallest building. It's white in Tacoma, and 15,000 square feet. Now, not only did they sign a lease that day, there was another company that also signed a lease around that same time frame in the same building. Okay, that's the first one. Let me make this bigger. When was this one? It's getting too soon. Hold on. Let me work on some stuff here real quick. Hold on. Let me close some stuff, open up some stuff, do this and do that. Okay, so Northwest Mutual came in, doesn't say how many employees, but they took up 15,000 square feet. In September, Sound Credit Union said, hold my beer, because we're going to take over 22,000 square feet. That's in the Tacoma's Pacific Plaza parking structure. Now, that's not the only space that they have, but they expanded their downtown office footprint by 60%. I'm missing a bunch of other things that have happened. This is not a full list of everything. This is not talking about the big merger that happened between, I think it was some banks, and their headquarters is here. It's not talking about the other company that went into the Unico property, the big tall building, the tallest one we have. It's not talking about that one. There's stuff out there, but I just wanted to keep this kind of somewhat short. Our office vacancy rate last I checked was like 9.8 or 9.3, something like that, which they still say is high, but it's going to keep dropping because here we go. There's a 12-story tower here, which used to be the State Farm Building. Tote Maritime's headquarters is there. Remember, Tote Maritime came into Tacoma and they added a bunch of employees. They moved from Federal Way to where they should be, which is here I mean, they actually use our port, and they are one of the suppliers of bringing cargo to Alaska, believe it or not. And it's right here, directly from here to Alaska. There's only one other company that does this, and other than that, Alaska just doesn't get a whole lot of anything. Hold on one second. Okay, so no one's calling and bugging, being silly. So the building, excuse me, 909A State Street. It's a landmark 12-story building. This was back in October. It got 2 tenants. 2, LPL Financial and Pacific Current. In September, they filed for building permits for office space. So currently the building, the State Farm building, is about 40% occupied. LPL Financial is going to only take about 3,350 square feet. Pacific Current is going to move in January, so coming up, and they're going to take 5,300 square feet. Now, these may sound like they're small pieces, and they are. They're small little chunks. But given the limited amount of office space we do have, that's a big deal, even though it's a small amount of space compared to the other 2 I mentioned. You add them up, and you're looking at almost 9,000 square feet just pulled off the market. Now, that would be a drop in the bucket in places like Bellevue that overbuilt. And I said this, and people laughed at me, and it's funny. I think if I was Tom Cruise and I said that, or if I looked like Tom Cruise, I don't think that people would sit and laugh as much. But there are people who sit and I talk to that I know, and they're like, yeah, it's not a good idea. And just understanding real estate a little bit. There's certain things that make sense and certain things that doesn't, right? And so this is one of those things that is great. At the time, the end of the second quarter, vacancy rate was at 10.8. So that was with the, let's see, when was that? In the second quarter, the original 10.2. Yeah. So now the Rhodes Building. Now, if you don't know the Rhodes Center, it's got really one of the most beautiful entryways that I've ever seen. And everybody that takes pictures of the entrance or go in there like, whoa, this is beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever, not ever seen, but it's one of those beautiful places here. It's just unique. The staircase that's going up, it's an elevator shaft. It's not staircase, but an elevator shaft in the middle. It's got it's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful architecture. And I know of a guy that went into that particular space. Since this year, they've signed 8 tenants, not 8 of them. They're doing 4 at a time. One of the guys I know, right? They have an architect firm that went in there. 4 tenants will move into a total of 17,000 square feet of recently renovated Rhodes Center in downtown once their respective spaces are completed. Maxim Healthcare, Mindful Support Services, ES Technologies, and CU Strategic Planning have all signed leases. Now, J Squared Investments owns a lot of different buildings downtown, and in fact, they also own Kelly's Olympian down in Portland. They are an out-of-state company, and they came into Tacoma, bought several buildings, and in fact, they own one of the buildings I work out of. They've done a lot of great things, and they're just adding tenants because they're smart. They know how to do it. Other folks come in, and it doesn't move as fast. It's just simple as that. But to basically, I'm going to scratch that 17,000 out because it's not important. They're saying so far in 2022, them alone have signed 42,000 square feet of space. 42,000 square feet of space just by themselves. Now, this is across over 8 different tenants. That's tremendous. Now, they're outpacing other companies. It even says this. Their lease rate is outpacing other people. Why? Because they're investing in their properties very heavily. When people look at that, they're like, okay, wait a second, this looks really, really good. Keep in mind where the Rhodes Center is where the farmers market happens every Thursday during the good parts of the year. It's right in the center of everything. The light rail line's not too far away, and actually the transit stop's not too far away. Buses are not too far away. Bunch of crap is right there. They don't really, if once you throw some nice amenities to it, and they got a lot of cool stuff. They talk about how they're attracting tenants with high-end build-out, flexible floor plans, and leasing incentives. They have an aggressive marketing campaign, which is what others can learn to do. Now, also, Campfire Coffee put in their roastery there. TRC co-working partners, they're there. So and the building has a ton of parking. During the pandemic, we had a market rate of 11.8% vacancy. That's high, right? Very high. It's now probably in the high 9s, right? After you look at all of these different things that have went on. And when you add up and this is not all. Remember, this is not all. We're looking at about 87,000, a little more than 87,000 square feet just off of the projects I mentioned. 87,000 square feet of office space being rented. That's not counting. Hold on a second. My dog likes to let me know about everything. But that's not counting the amount of office space that's been taken offline because it's being converted. So that high percent that I mentioned earlier, that 10.3%, which is probably now in the high 9s or maybe lower, is taking DaVita, the whole building, into account. It's taking in the Bank of California building into account because they're both listed as office. It's taking the old Key Bank building into account because I think maybe that one's been pulled off, and the Washington Bank building. Both of those maybe are not into the figure. I'm not real sure. But it's based on what they were classified as. And because there are 4 different properties now that are being converted from office to residential, it changes things. Because if you look at the Washington Bank building, that's a big ass building. Then when you look at the Key Bank building, that's also pretty decent size. There's so many different spaces now that are being taken offline, and they're no longer considered to be office. That lowers the vacancy rate, which is important. Hold on one second. Heard a frog outside. So anyway, those have been taken offline. The Kelly's Olympian that's going to be going in has been delayed due to permitting issues. It's not a shock. We're still not back up to where we need to be in terms of getting permits and stuff like that done. That slowed everybody up. Could be why the town center's taking so long. It could be why a lot of things. We need to get those folks back in the office and doing what they need to do. But the Rhodes Center offers amenities. This is something that's so critical. You can't just have office space and say, screw it, come in if you want. You have to bring people to it. And the reason why they were so quickly able to convert the office space is because they're bringing a Portland mentality. It's not a Hamlet view, right? They're bringing a Portland mentality, like this is what you have to do in Portland to stand out from some of the others. And that's what some of these developers are doing, and they're doing it correctly. They're bringing in office tenants such as a yoga studio. Tenant amenities are a yoga studio, virtual cycling classes, a gym, and locker rooms, and high-definition multi-sport simulator in the tenant lounge. So if you have an office there, that's what you have access to. Now, when it comes to their retail side of things, they're doing great too. Campfire Coffee also, in addition to this, is going to rent out an office or a retail space and have their flagship store right in the core of all this activity. Because the writing is on the wall, there's a whole lot of crap going on right in that general area. If you drop a pin right there where the Rhodes Center is and draw like 1,000 feet in any direction, just a circle 1,000 feet from that point, there's a lot of crap happening just right in that spot. A lot of activity. So it's not shocking. I know of someone else that I personally am helping to get retail space downtown. I know of a few people. And so there's a lot of stuff coming online. We may not get that mall, but we'll have enough people to basically create our own, if you know what I mean. So we're getting more and more stuff here. This is important because as the vacancy rate drops in terms of offices, that means there's more of an incentive to build office space. Right now, the reason why DaVita has been changed to the DaVita building is going to residential is because the fear is we're not going to find people to take over this building. Like they wanted one big tenant, and I don't think that's possible anymore. The days of one big company taking over the whole thing is gone. I think you're going to have a lot of multi-tenants, a lot of different firms, which is a good thing because unlike Seattle and Bellevue, if a company is starting to take a dip and they start to shave off people, hundreds at a time, it doesn't impact it. It's a massive impact. Here, we don't have stuff like that typically. You don't have companies that have 1,000 employees at a time. We have those that have 15 or 20 or 30. So if that company were to lay off, sucks, but it's 20 or 30 people. It's not 300 or 400. God, I'm sorry, guys. Hold on. Okay, hopefully no more interruptions. This dog. So we are better prepared because we're hiring a lot of different, or we're bringing in a lot of different companies that can bring in a lot of different sets and groups of people. This is very important because that's really how it should be. That's how it used to be. If you look at old office spaces and buildings, they used to have dozens and dozens and dozens of different companies and firms in there. And so we, as a modern society, have kind of went away from that. You would have one big company swallow up the whole building. And landlords love it, developers love it because it's an easy sell. I only have to deal with one person. But we're not working in that same parameter anymore. We're working where we have a lot of people who are considering working from home because it just makes more sense. Now, there are other things that I think as the city starts to develop and grow, there are things that it needs to do. One of which is we don't have a lot of parking. However, that's not necessarily true. The area on 25th Street, underneath the bridge, the interstate bridge, which was a homeless encampment for a little bit of time, was a problem. There are two sides to that, right? One, then they're very large. When we're talking about parking, because that's going to come up, those two areas should be utilized. Now, I know the state owns it, but the city and the state should work together, which, again, one of the frustrating parts about Tacoma agencies and organizations, that whole working together is a foreign concept. Even within the same organization, working together sometimes is just like, what? This is mine. Like, I don't want to share the love. This is all mine. I can do it myself. That is Hamlet views. We're too big for that. You don't see that going on in Spokane. You don't see that crap going on in Portland or Seattle or any city. Even in Bowling Green, Kentucky, that doesn't go on anymore. It's just, that's what you do when you're a tiny little town. We got to change those views. And the mindset. You don't get anywhere by doing that. You're not a know-it-all. And unfortunately, we have people who think that they know everything and they don't need any sort of help from anybody else. This shows you right here that it takes a company from out of town to bring some of what they would have done anyway in other places here because it works. We have to bring, and as a result of them doing that, as a result of them not being afraid to spend money, and as a result of them not saying, well, there's a huge hole underneath, screw it, we'll allow the market to decide what comes. They're taking a proactive approach similar to Trent Development and saying, let's fill that space in. We're going to provide and give amenities to our tenants. So we'll fill that space in. We are not adding a burden to the residential side of things, or not residential, to the retail side of things. We're not putting pressure on that. We're not adding to that vacancy rate because, again, that's high also. So then stores don't want to come because they're like, well, nobody's down there. So they're trying to fill all that space in and not have the extra retail that's just hanging out until we can absorb quite a bit of that. And we're doing that slowly. But this is very important because we went from almost 12% probably down to 9 something. I'd be curious to see where we are. Again, I've only mentioned just a few of these stories, but this particular situation with the Rhodes Center, they added 8 different tenants. 8 tenants in 1 year in one building. You know what I mean? Like it's phenomenal. It is phenomenal. And we're still not done in terms of the various different things that are happening down here. Imagine the hundreds of employees that are now going to be in downtown, starting from now until probably the middle of next year. There's a huge group of people that are going to be coming into the city every day, working every day. And the cool thing is with that Rhodes Center, they have tons of parking. It's not a concern for them. It's not like you have to figure out parking. It's there. It's available. So they're not adding to the burden of street parking, which has become an issue. We have the parking, but when I mentioned that that area that used to have the encampment is parking, I think parking will become a big problem as time goes on. Big problem. Sorry for the smoke alarm. It started today, but it's going to be a concern. I think that vacant area underneath the bridge would serve perfectly as a parking space, like for parking. Fence it all in. Have security that watches cars all day, and people have to pay to go in there, obviously. But it makes money for the city and the state, and it provides a good resource. The light rail line is right there. People can walk right to it. It utilizes 25th Street more. It maybe will cut down on some of the riffraff that's going on over there. And then you have another big lot over there as well that's humongous, that probably can do the same thing. And if the city really wanted to get serious, it could run a shuttle that will take people in a loop to those 2 parking areas. They're fairly large. I'm sure they can hold a couple of hundred cars maybe. So there's opportunity for us to really focus on parking and not use up all of our valuable assets downtown. Parking should be outside of downtown, in my opinion. So these are good things. What are your thoughts about this? We are recovering much faster than people thought. We're doing a lot of great things. And I think that, what, buddy? What? It's okay. Whenever everybody's gone or he thinks he's alone, he wants to whimper. But he realizes I'm here. He hears me, but he didn't realize I was in here. Now he comes in here. You're fine, buddy. Yeah, you're fine. Anyhow, tell me what your thoughts are. Right? What are your thoughts about Tacoma? It has never been a better time to move to the city. There are so many retail projects that are going on. There's a tremendous amount of residential projects going on that we all know about. And now office is coming in. When you start getting these 4 at a time, it's like they overshot. J squared overshot. Because they bring in 4 at a damn time. That's a good thing. That's an amazing thing. I tell people, if you move here and you want an apartment, downtown's where it is. Don't go out to some of these other areas. You could, sure. But the activity, the fun is going to start happening right in downtown. I know that for certain. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff happening. So that is where I tell people, if you're going to move in, probably that general area. These other places that are, and I'm not going to mention them, but some of these other places, you're paying a lot of money for a zip code. Anyhow, tell me what your thoughts are. Be sure to join the Discord down in the description box below. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and comment. Until next time, I will see you. Take care.